Come back home to me, where rivers are running free, through valleys as far as the eye can see. I'll be waiting on you till you're in my arms, a place that you can call your home. Come back home to me, shelter from the storm, I'll keep you safe and warm. We'll hide out here for as long as you want, brick by brick, we lay the bones to
Hello. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's a little bit of a different background than usual and a little bit of a different intro. I really wanted to make this end of the year video kind of like my celebratory memory type video where I could look back on and remember that year based on the books that I read. This year I reached 100 books, which is the first time I've ever done that, especially in recent years when I've really picked up more and more reading. I mean, I've always been a lifetime reader, I've always read, but it really picked up the last 5 years. And, I was pregnant, I had a kid, and so finding time for reading has been extra challenging for me. So for me to have hit 100 books this year is a big accomplishment for me. I have really had to make the time and really focus on reading versus scrolling on my phone or doing other things. And so I'm proud of myself. And I wanted to do just a nice little memorial video that I could look back on and say, yay, I did it. And this is basically, a video journal for myself. This YouTube channel is something where I can always go and look back and see what I was reading and see where I was at that time in my life. So I appreciate you being here. I decided to kind of shoot in all of the bookish places in my house that really was part of my book journey this year. I know I'm getting really sentimental, but it's true. This is one of the big bookish places in my house. It's my bookshelf in my bedroom, and this holds the majority of my books. I did not make them pretty. I did not clean it up for this video just because I want to immortalize it how it is. And it is not an aesthetic, pretty shelf. It's been very practical. I mean, I've cut off these bottom shelves in the shop, but if you look below, you'll see a whole shelf of all these children books that are my daughter's. And then I have toys down here and other random stuff that we kind of slot down there that we don't care if she can reach. I also wanted to kind of start here and talk about my 10 favorite books of this year. I'm just going to kind of put them on the screen somehow. And I just kind of wanted to walk through each book really quickly because if they're my top 10, I've talked about them probably quite a bit on this channel. And so I don't want to talk too much about them. So let's do a quick run through of my top 10. The first book is Know My Name, and this is by Chanel Miller. This is a nonfiction book that I really loved. I can't believe it is a debut novel for her. I think she writes so beautifully, and it is just a powerful book that I think every woman can relate to, and I think every man should read. 2 is The Rachel Incident. This was probably my biggest surprise book. I really enjoyed all the little plot twists and the funny moments. The general premise of the book is actually kind of sad, and it's dealing with like coming of age, being lonely, not knowing who you are, but deals with heavy topics, but there's so much funny banter and this great central friendship that is really relatable and comical that I think really drives the book home. So you get a little bit of bitter and a little bit of sweet, and I really enjoyed it. Next is Lie With Me. This is a sweet little novel that I picked out at Barnes & Noble's without reading any reviews, and I hadn't heard anything about it, and I absolutely loved it. It ended up making me pick up his other book, and I'm just really glad that I was introduced to this book, especially since it's a translated work. I probably wouldn't have seen online or picked up unless I was like in a niche book area of the internet, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next is This Ordinary Stardust. I actually got this as a digital ARC this year, so I didn't really know what to expect except for the premise. Really, really loved it. This is also a debut novel, and it's just a great memoir of science, grief, hope, and just finding the light in really dark moments. Then we have The Light Pirate. This book was so unexpected. I loved the character, I loved the relationships, I loved the magical realism, and it really deals with a heavy topic of climate change, but there is hope in it, and I really appreciated that. Next is The Storm We Made. I loved this book. I loved the dynamics of it. Another debut novel. There's definitely a theme going on here, and it was a new release this year. I really enjoyed it. I think it is a great kind of butterfly effect book where you can see decisions that really sprawl out and change what happens to the characters. Next is Braiding Sweetgrass. This nonfiction book really changed the way that I think about nature. I think about the world around me. It is definitely a book I need to reread because there's so much to take in. And I highly, highly recommend anybody that likes nonfiction or anybody that just feels like they like nature, they like being outside. It is so important, I feel like, for most anybody to read, but especially if you fall into one of those categories. Next is A Secret History. This is probably one of the biggest hype books out there, and this was one of the few books that actually lived up to the hype for me. I really enjoyed the characters and the atmosphere, and I'm so glad that I waited to read it in the fall time. I think it really added to the atmospheric element of it and really, really added to my enjoyment. Next is Atonement. This is a book that one of my favorite movies is based off of, so I was a little hesitant going in because I had really high hopes, and I'm glad that it lived up to the hopes. It is very different prose than what most of the other books on my list were like, but it is so beautiful, and it's just a really tragic love story, but there's so many other themes that go throughout it that I just absolutely loved it. And then lastly is Rivals. I read this book because I was obsessed with the show, still am, and I needed to kind of continue my fix after I finished the first season, and it is just so fun. It's not one that I would really recommend for everybody. It's more of a personal pick for me, but it really came at a time when I was in a reading slump, and I really enjoyed it, and it just made me happy. So those were my top 10. They're quite a range of books. They're all so different, but it is very representative. It is very representative of my reading, and I'm such a mood reader, and I like to read what other people are enjoying as well. I'm very curious, so it definitely represents kind of how I am as a reader. I don't just read fantasy, or I don't just read lit fic. I'm kind of all over the place, so I think that's a good representation of this year for me. So yeah, that is the bookshelf. Let's move on to my next bookish area that I wanted to share with you. Here we are at my next bookish location, and this is my little reading nook. This is where I read so many books. I put so many hours into this little couch here that I had to include it. I mean, I initially didn't have this space in the bedroom until we kind of reconfigured it and put the bookshelf. The bookshelf is actually across from me behind the camera. And then we had this kind of section from our couch from downstairs, and it's a sectional and just didn't fit down there. So we had moved it up here when we moved in, and it was kind of like a catch-all chair. You know, those chairs that like you just throw clothes on or you just throw things on. So I actually have been using it quite a lot this year, and it's just so cozy, and I can still be in the bedroom, and my husband can watch TV or watch whatever he wants to do, and I can still like be here with him, but also have like my own space to read. So I've really appreciated it this year. So I wanted to go through some of my reading stats, and I didn't want to do too deep of a dive because I just think that that's probably boring, but I did want to kind of do like a rough overview for myself to kind of look back on and to kind of share it with you. I read 100 books. I don't think I'm going to finish another book this year because I'm really just watching movies and chilling out and sleeping in. So I think it'll stay at 100 books. And then it says 35,151 pages. When I check Goodreads, it says 35,500 something pages. So it really, I guess, depends on the edition or the version of the book that I'm reading, but we'll stay around 35,000 pages, which is a lot of pages. If we look at my fiction nonfiction split, that really interests me because I enjoy both fiction and nonfiction. And my fiction was 82% and my nonfiction was 18%. So I think that that's fair. I probably want to up that nonfiction to like 20-25%. So like maybe every 3 books I'll read a nonfiction. I think that that's pretty good. And my top 3 genres were literary, fantasy, and contemporary. Literary is no surprise. It's usually always pretty high for me. I usually read mostly literary fiction. And then I have fantasy, which definitely was a big increase this year because I was really trying to read more fantasy books because those tended to be the books that were really popular. I feel like in the book community, you have really big groups of romance readers and really big groups of fantasy slash sci-fi. And a lot of books in those categories are recommended. And so I had a bunch of FOMO and definitely picked up a lot more fantasy books than I normally do. And then I also made it a goal of this year to read the Throne of Glass series because it was getting so much attention with ACOTAR and her other books that I really just wanted to see for myself if it was something for me. And from what I had read about the different series that she had, Throne of Glass seemed like the the one that I would enjoy the most based on the premise and the writing and everything like that. So I read all 8 of the Throne of Glass books this year, and I'll say I enjoyed them, but I'm not in love with them like most people are with those books. I think that they're fine. I think they're enjoyable, but it didn't do anything special for me, I guess. So I'm glad I read them because now I know, but they definitely didn't make a big impression on me. I kind of like looking at the number of books in the month breakdown so you can kind of see like where I was peaking and reading the most books and the most pages. And I definitely started out kind of slow in the beginning of the year and it really ramped up as the year went on. And I think around April, May is when I hit the most books that I read per month. And that makes sense because I think that's around the time that I changed my reading goal from 50 to 100 because I was reading so much. I was like, I can do 100. And so I got really confident at that point and upped my goal. And then I kind of went down in, I think like June, July. I was traveling, doing trips. And then at the end of the year, I kind of dipped because I was reading a lot of short books and, holidays, different things going on. So that kind of slowed down my reading. My average rating this year was a 3.6, which I don't think is great. I would love it to be like a 3.8 or 4, but I think that that is something that I will manage next year. I tend to rate most books 3 if I enjoyed it, but they're not really impactful for me. And so I think it's a fair rating. I read a lot of books that were recommended by others and that were really popular. So I think next year, when I'm going to be focusing more on my backlist, I think that rating is going to go, or that average rating is going to go up. So those are my general stats this year. So let's go to my next bookish spot. This is my next bookish spot. If you were watching my channel when I started in early spring or have watched some of those videos, I did my first few videos on the ground in this corner of my office. As you can see, I still have my bookshelf in my office here that is just a random assortment of books. There's some unread books here, and then it's kind of like a catch-all shelf, just like everything in my house. It's very practical and not aesthetic. And I kind of wanted to reflect on my goals that I had for this year and what I want to do next year in this spot because I'm feeling very nostalgic because I talked about my goals and a lot of my early year bookish stuff here in this spot. So the first goal that's really easy to talk about is just my book goal. I started with 50 books that I upped to 100, and I've already kind of talked about that many times before, which got me to my 100 book goal. And then I was aiming to do the Throne of Glass series, which I accomplished. I really made it practical for myself or realistic for myself and decided to read 1 book a month. And I think I skipped August because of something, but I ended up reading the last book in September because there's 8 books. And so I did really well with that. I think I paced it out very well and was able to accomplish that goal. And then I really wanted to read more graphic novels. That kind of sputtered out in the beginning of the year. I was doing really well with reading 1 graphic novel a month, but I felt like I was kind of forcing it. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I just don't like or just don't love graphic novels, or if I just haven't found the right ones, or I don't know what I'm interested in reading in a graphic novel. So, although I enjoyed the graphic novels that I picked up, I don't know if I was enjoying them enough to reach for them and want to read more. So, I tried it. I definitely read more graphic novels than I ever have. And I think it's kind of opened my mind and opened me up to them more. But I don't think that I will be reading as many as I kind of thought I would. I think that was the main goals that I had this year. For next year, I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to keep my 50 book goal. Even if I'm reading really quickly, like I did this year, I'm going to keep it to 50 books. I'm not going to up it to 100. I just want to keep it realistic, and I really want to be intentional and slow down. It's funny because after this year, I felt like I was just reading so many books and really pushing myself, which is a good thing because I was enjoying it. But I maybe was passing up other books that were maybe longer because I couldn't fit them in, and I didn't want to slow the pacing of how many books I was reading. And I think this is a common thing among a lot of people that I have seen, especially book content creators that read quite a bit. And I feel like everybody is saying they're going to slow down next year and be more intentional. And it's just kind of funny that that's exactly how I feel too. And I just want to focus on taking it in, marinating. And if I only read 10 pages one day, then that's okay. Because this year I was pacing like 100 plus pages a day. And I really want to focus on the books that I have on my TBR and my backlist of books that I've been wanting to read versus maybe new releases, new hype books. And I think I've really learned this year that I don't tend to love those hyped books usually, and I have to be more choosy with those because the FOMO will never die. I will always want to read the popular book, but I need to choose which ones that I think will fit me better instead of just reading it because it's hyped, whether it's a premise I would enjoy or not. And so I think it's just picking the books better and really focusing on my TBR, and especially my physical TBR. I definitely want to keep dwindling away at the books that I own because I think I did a really good job of that the last half of this year. And I think I did a really good job at also just buying used books and borrowing more books and not going and having to purchase a full price book every time and not needing that serotonin hit. So I want to be more mindful of my buying and borrow books more, and which I've been doing a good job of, and buying used books. And I think at the end of the year, I can kind of rehash and look at what I read. And if there are books that I don't own that I really enjoyed that year, then I can go out and reward myself and go and buy that book if I want. That is my goals for next year. It's pretty simple. I mean, I think the general idea is just keep it simple, and I am very excited about doing that. So let's go to my final bookish spot. And here we are. This is the final destination, the final spot of this video. This is kind of where I ended the year on my book channel. I was able to move this shelf and repurpose it in here and kind of start stacking all of my read books on it. And so it's been really fun to physically see. I obviously don't own every book that I read in 2024. And if you might have noticed in the intro time lapse, I kind of just put in pictures of covers versus actually having the physical book in those time lapses, because this is probably 75% of the books. It's definitely not 100% of the books that I read this year, but they're definitely the books that I own. And it's just been really fun to physically see it all kind of stack up and grow from there. And it's made me really proud of myself. And I am just so appreciative of everybody that has come and watched my channel and watched a video of mine and maybe given me a thumbs up or even subscribed to my channel. It has meant so much to me to just see other people that are enjoying books and enjoying my little niche corner of the internet. And I've had so much fun doing this kind of content and knowing that it is really going to be a nice little book journal for me to look back at, a digital book journal. And I can't wait for next year. I have so many ideas and so many things that I want to try. And I just hope that you'll be here with me for the journey and that I can find more people that are reading books that I love and kind of create more of a community amongst us all. And I just appreciate you so much. And I thank you so much for being here. It's meant so much. And I will see you in the next year in my next video. Bye.
Come back home.